Now we return to one of South Australia's most intriguing murder cases, that involving Henry Keogh and Anna Jane Chaney. Earlier this year we brought you a story about the trials that led to the conviction of Keogh for the murder of his young fiancée. It detailed many perceived flaws in the evidence, which led a group of Adelaide lawyers to petition the government to have the case reviewed. But the Attorney-General says, despite new evidence, there'll be no review. And as Rowan Wen reports, the Attorney-General's ruling follows discussions with the Solicitor-General, who in turn consulted with the Director of Public Prosecutions, the very man who ran the case now being criticised.
I think the decision is a reflection on our justice system. It's a disgrace.
It's been 8 years since young, attractive Adelaide lawyer Anna Jane Chaney was found dead in her bath, and almost 7 years since her fiancé Henry Keogh was sent to jail for her murder. Do you believe that Anna Jane Chaney was actually murdered?
No, I don't. I don't think there's any sufficient evidence to indicate that a crime took place at all.
Earlier this year we brought you a story analysing that high-profile case, and specifically the evidence given by Dr Colin Manock.
The evidence given by Dr Manock in the Keogh case was wrong, and in lots of other cases was wrong.
Dr Colin Manock was South Australia's head of forensic pathology for almost 30 years. But amazingly, Manock had no formal qualifications in the crucial field of histopathology. So he hadn't done the training, but they gave him the gig?
He was given the job, and then there were some notes in one of the earlier proceedings where they said, we knew we were taking a bit of a risk because we were appointing somebody without proper qualifications. But it was our view that he would get the qualifications after he was appointed.
You'll remember throughout the trials, Manock gave evidence that has since been widely criticised by other pathologists who are vastly better qualified.
In my view, what happened in Keogh was a miscarriage of justice.
At the time of the Keogh trials, questions had been raised about Dr Manock's findings on the deaths of 3 infants. Manock claimed the babies had died of bronchopneumonia, but a coronial inquest would later find the children may have actually been beaten to death. No one has ever faced charges.
So why would the coroner appoint Dr Manock to do the autopsy of Anna Chaney when he'd previously had extensive evidence over the previous 12 months that Dr Manock wasn't doing his job properly?
Kevin Borick QC, former law professor Bob Moles and others spent months poring over the evidence presented at the trials and believe that Henry Keogh was wrongly convicted.
There are a lot of victims, and Henry Keogh is one victim of the system.
Director of Public Prosecutions Paul Rofe was the man who prosecuted Henry Keogh in the 2 murder trials, the first ending in a hung jury.
This whole process has been so upsetting to the Chaney family, and it's just being prolonged by these sorts of...
We certainly don't want to upset the Chaney family, but if there's 2 victims here and one of them's in jail, shouldn't we be looking at that?
Oh yes, as I said, I'm not afraid of media scrutiny, but I mean, I think it's got to be properly based.
Our story detailed a number of important facts that were never properly dealt with during the trial, from a contaminated crime scene to bruises that were later found not to be bruises at all. There were also indications the body had been tampered with. Police photos show Anna Jane's hair had been combed and makeup had been applied to her face. But it does indicate that somebody's been dealing with the body.
That's your interpretation.
Well, how else does she get made up and get her hair done?
I've got no idea. But I mean, it may be someone who just out of respect for a dead person, you know.
Which is fine, except it does indicate that somebody has been dealing with the body.
It may have been the coroner's assistant, I don't know.
Making her up at the scene of the death?
Look, I honestly don't know, but it doesn't concern me.
Then there was the startling admission from South Australia's Director of Public Prosecutions that he wasn't aware of SAPOL's police forensic guidelines, which should be the basis of any thorough investigation. Was it unfortunate that Manock was the only one who got to see the body?
No, as I said, that was the established procedure at the time, in my experience.
But it goes against the police forensic guidelines?
Well, I haven't seen those and I'm not aware of them.
And then there was that video which clearly shows it would be virtually impossible for anyone to drown an adult woman in the manner described by Dr Manock.
The specialists tell us that it simply can't be done.
More likely, the group argue, Anna Jane Chaney may simply have slipped over and drowned. Following our program, lawyers Kevin Borick, fellow lawyer Chris Patterson and Bob Moles presented a petition to the Governor detailing their concerns and asking that the Keogh case be properly reviewed. But in the kind of seemingly cynical exercise that is fast coming to define this government, just 2 days before Christmas, Attorney General Michael Atkinson has begun notifying the lawyers to say the matter won't be reviewed.
To bring it out and bring the decision out at the time when people are on holidays and there's everything happening is a cowardly decision in my view.
Undeterred, Kevin Borick says the group won't back down and won't be intimidated by the Adelaide establishment.
The government and the DPP and the advertiser seem to think that the public have confidence in the justice system, but if they have, it's misplaced.
The top QC finishing off with his own Christmas message for the Attorney General.
I think he thinks he's playing one-day cricket when in fact he's playing a test match. It's a long way to go, it's just the beginning.